because we ended at Terah. So let's start in Genesis chapter 11 from say verse 26. When Terah, this is the father of Abram, lived 70 years, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran, and not necessarily in that order. But we have the three sons of Terah. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren and she had no child. So we have Abram's family of three boys, their father Terah. One of his brothers dies fairly young, while his father Terah is still alive. So Terah sadly sees one of his sons die, but he has a grandson through him. That's Lot, of course, and of course we see a lot more of Lot later. So he has two sons and grandson Lot. We have Abram. He has a wife Sarai, and his brother Nahor has a wife Milcah. Milcah, we find, is a daughter of Haran. So Haran had two kids, at least two kids we know of, Lot and Milcah. So Nahor marries his niece, which is interesting. But more interesting that we find out later on that Sarai was Abram's half sister, right? That Terah was also her father with a different wife. But we don't, for some reason, Moses doesn't tell us that here. We find that out later on. That would be a spoiler, I guess, because this is revealed in chapter 20 when Abraham is trying to pretend that Sarai is his sister, which is a half truth or half lie, depending on how you want to look at it, because indeed she is his half sister. So they're all kind of interbred, really, this family. And there's this important note. Now Sarai was barren; she had no child. So Haran had kids, and he's the one that doesn't survive. He dies young, apparently, and now Sarai and Abram have no children. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. It's kind of confusing here because there's a different Haran now. There's a Haran who was a son of Terah who died, the father of Lot. Now there's a place called Haran, and this has nothing to do with them. This is not even where they were from. This is kind of between Ur, the Chaldeans. This is Mesopotamia, and the Promised Land in Canaan. It doesn't tell us why Terah was taking his son Abram and Lot to leave where they were in Ur and to go to the land of Canaan. We actually find out later on that God had called Abram, but it sounds like when you read this verse that that Terah was one who decided to do this. But actually, we find out that the person who was directed to move was Abram. That God was calling Abram. Terah was an old man at this point, and I guess Abram was really the person in charge of this family. His brother, of course, Nahor, does not move. He stays apparently where they are. But Abram, his wife Sarai, and Lot are the ones that travel, and the patriarch of this family, Terah, who again is old because when they get to Haran rather, he dies there at 205 years old. One of the things we see in the genealogy above is that people's lives are getting shorter. So instead of being 900 years old and dying, we see generations kind of the age cuts down to around 400, and about now the ages are maxing out around 200. And we remember that earlier God had said that He was going to make the maximum length of man's years 120, and we're seeing that's coming about slowly, not all at once, because Noah was allowed to be 950 when he died, but now we see the lives shortening, and Terah now dies at 205 years. So they're on their way to Canaan, but stopped at a city called Haran, and that is where Terah dies, and that is where the chapter ends. So Nahor and Milcah are still living in Ur of the Chaldees, apparently, but Abram and his nephew Lot and his wife Sarai are have moved to Haran, and that's where we end in this chapter. So we'll go get now to chapter 12, the call of Abram. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the nations of the earth shall be blessed." This is a very important chapter, very important verse here. And we're going to hear this repeated again and again about how Abraham is going to become a great nation. Those who bless him and bless the nation of Israel will be blessed, and those who curse will be cursed. And that through him, he will bless all of the earth. In you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And we understand that happens through Jesus Christ, of course. But this is a very important set of verses. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land, and then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. So we'll stop here for now and talk about these verses. So, why did God talk to Abram? How did he talk to Abram? We don't know. Did he talk to him in a dream? Did he hear him audibly? Did he see a vision? The Bible does not tell us. All it tells us is the Lord said to Abram, and it's very clear: "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So very clear, very specific, and in some ways very confusing too. He's not telling him where he's going to send them. We know, of course, it's going to be Canaan, but God is saying, I'm going to send you to a place that I will show you. So Abraham has to pick up everything and go in faith. You would think, reading this, that Abraham must have been a follower of God for years, that he was worshiping God, and when God gives him this command, he obeys a God that he's been worshiping for a long time. But that's not really what we read in other parts of the Bible. It turns out Abram and his family were idolaters. There are some traditions that hold that Terah's occupation was making idols. That's not stated specifically in the Bible. But if we look at Joshua chapter 24, this is when Joshua is about to die, and he's giving his final instructions to the tribes before his death. Can we turn to Joshua chapter 24? Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates, Terah, the father of Abraham and of Nahor, and they served other gods." So before the call of Abraham, or Abram at the time, he and his father Terah and his brother Nahor, they all lived in Mesopotamia beyond the Euphrates, and they worshipped other gods. So Abraham was not one who worshiped God from the time he was young in his youth. we hear, earlier in Genesis, talks about how people began to call upon the name of the Lord. They also began, some people, well, the majority probably were idolaters and not worshipers of God. And it's clear here that Abram, Nahor, and Terah were worshipers of other gods. When the descendant of Nahor, Laban, right, the brother of Rebekah, when Rachel and Lee and Jacob leave, Rachel steals his idols. So his family's still idolaters at that time that Jacob flees Esau and goes to his uncle Laban's place, and gets married to Leah and Rachel. They're idolaters, and she steals idols of her father. But this goes back generations. So even to the time of Terah, Abraham, Nahor, they were idolaters. God spoke to an idolater, Abram, and chose him. So it wasn't that Abraham was so faithful to God before the call. This came after. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made its offspring many. We turn to Acts chapter 7. So this is Stephen's speech to the Sanhedrin now. And in chapter 7, Stephen, before the high priest and Sanhedrin, says, and the high priest said, are these things so? And Stephen said, brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, go out from your land and from your kindred and go into the land that I will show you. Then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. After his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living. So it is. There are more details in some of the other books of the Bible, but then Moses, I guess, it kind of initially discusses in Genesis 11 and 12. So it was several steps, but God called Abram to leave Ur of the Chaldees. And then they stopped in Haran, maybe because their father was ailing. But we know that Terah died in Haran. And after that, God called him, okay, it's time to leave Haran and go to the place that he's going to show him, which, of course, is Canaan. And Abram obeys God and moves his family and all the possessions that they have to Canaan. And, of course, we'll see in the chapters that follow what happens to them. In Hebrews chapter 11, I'm making Rob Bowl with the Bible. In Hebrews chapter 11, the author of Hebrews says in 11 verse 8, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven, and as many and as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. So Abram heeds God's call, even though he was not one of the idols he was worshiping. But God speaks to him somehow. Abram believes God and leaves off family, the place that he was familiar with, the occupation he was familiar with. For the rest of his life, he would be on the move, never settling anywhere for long, for the most part living in tents. But he obeys. So he goes from his country, he takes his father, his elderly father, and his nephew and his wife, and whatever possessions they had and whatever servants they accumulate along the way. And he believes God, that God is going to turn him, even though he's a man with no children of his own, into a great nation. Maybe he thought that it would be through Lot. We don't know what his thinking was, but he believed that God was going to bless him and make his name great. I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. And the amazing thing is that Abram believes God, and we know that he's a man of faith from the first time God speaks to him. And throughout God's relationship with Abram, he believes God, and that is credited to him as righteousness. That when God tells him he's going to have many descendants, so that they're innumerable, they cannot be counted, Abram believes him. And the first test, really, of his faith is that he obeyed, that he picked up everything and moved, which is not an easy thing to do, especially as you get older. Alyssa's moving now to Georgia, and that is not fun. I hate moving. I'm sure everybody here hates moving, having to get, all that stuff you accumulate over the years, decide what you're going to keep, what you're going to discard of, and how you're going to get rid of it, and then move it. But I never moved and not known where I was going. Has anybody packed up all their stuff and not had any idea where they were going to go, and were just waiting on God to tell them where? That takes a lot of faith. I'm sure Sarai was saying, "Are you sure? Who is this God that's telling you to do this? Can you trust him? Are you having a hallucination? Is it real?" But Sarai also had faith, and she believed God also. And she believed the impossible thing, that she would have children. So we'll see all this play out, of course. But that is what faith is: believing things that are unseen, trusting this invisible God. There is no idol of God, right? And yet believing him to the point that he would risk his life. You risk your life when you travel in those days, right? There's no safety in traveling. There are no policemen. There's no highway patrol. There's nothing to protect you when you're out exposed as they are. In foreign countries and foreign places, you have no friends, you have no allies. You're on your own. But yet, Abraham lived in tents pretty much for the rest of his life. So in verse 4 again, so Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So haven't been 75 yet, but the older you get, again, the harder it is to move, the more painful it is, the more difficult. Whatever goods and things you accumulate over 75 years of life, having to figure out what you're going to take and then do it, it's got to be hard. But yet he does all these things. He is obedient, and he travels very far, first to Haran and then from Haran to Canaan after his father Terah dies. If you look into the names of Terah, Milcah, Sarai, they all have to do with the moon god. So there's some commentators that do think that they must have been into the moon cult big time and probably made these moon cult idols, because all of their names have to do with these Mesopotamian moon gods. Terah's name is associated with that. Sarai also, and Milcah. So it's speculation, of course, but that is when you study the origination of their names, it appears to be the case. Abram, not so much. Exalted Father, but the rest of them all seem to be names that have to do with the moon cult. The question then again is, why did God choose Abram? It wasn't, again, because he was faithful to him, because he was worshiping him from before, that from the time of Enoch through Noah, through Shem, through Eber, through all these other descendants, that they're all worshipers of God, and Abram was a worshiper of God also. The Bible tells us the opposite, that he was an idolater, that his father was an idolater, and yet God chose him. God blessed him. He chose him to bless, and then to bless through him, to bless the whole world. And the question is, why? Is there something special about Abram? Did Abram deserve it? Was there some good work in Abram, some good thing in Abram? How does God save anybody? Well, how does God choose anybody? And these are certainly questions we should ponder. And I don't think we're going to we'll ever fully understand why God chooses anyone, especially us as individuals. because we all know how unlikely it was that God would choose if it's choosing on merit, but it is not a meritocracy. God does not choose. Well, I'll choose the best, the most virtuous people, and choose them to save. Uh, God does not take all of our good deeds and weigh them against our bad deeds, and then choose those whose good deeds outweigh their bad. That is not how anyone is saved. And certainly not Abram. If we turn to Romans chapter 4, I think somebody's been teaching Romans chapter 4 recently. Sure, he memorized all these words. What then shall we say was gained by Abraham, our forefather, according to the flesh? For if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Now, to the one who works, his wages are not counted as a gift, but as his due. And to the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. Just as David also speaks of the blessing of the one to whom God counts righteousness apart from works. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is a man against whom the Lord will not count his sin. Abram was an idolater. He was a sinner. He was not. He did not know God. He was not following God. He was not doing anything that would stand out as righteous. But yet, when God gave him the command, when God chose him, he believed God. He acted in faith and pulled up his family and moved. And later on, when God tells him that his offspring will be innumerable, he believed him even though he was 90 years old, 100 years old, and had no children. But God blessed him because he believed, not because of any work that he did, not because of any good thing he did or could do. We see in the New Testament when Jesus calls his disciples, was there any of them so virtuous or so good that it would make sense that Jesus would call them? He picked a bunch of fishermen, not the kind of people you would think of as pious or godly or virtuous. Quite the opposite. These are very, very rough people, totally uneducated people, not the ones you would think would be writing theology and writing books of the Bible and running the church. But that's who Jesus chose. He chose Peter. He chose John and James, and he chooses these fishermen. He calls them, and they drop their nets and follow after him. So when the call came, they acted out in faith. They believed, and they followed him. And where does this faith come from? It does not come from them. God, that faith was a gift. We read this in Ephesians chapter 2. There's no means for boasting, right? Abraham can't say, well, I was saved because of my wonderful faith that came from inside of me. And that is why God saw that faith in me and decided to save me. That is not how he was saved, or any of us are. Ephesians chapter 2 says, and you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the flesh and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. Abram was a wicked person. He was a sinner. He was an idolater, making idols probably, but certainly a worshiper of idols. And God made him alive. God gave him life. He gave him faith, and he called him, and he spoke to him. He gave him the faith that was necessary to respond, and he saved him. But God, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved and raised up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not of your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. So Abram has no reason to boast because he was saved. It wasn't because of his great characteristics that came about by himself. Uh, it wasn't that God saw something good in him and chose him because of that. Whatever good that is in him came from God. Those were all gifts to him from God. God made all of us. Whatever abilities we have, whatever our personalities or our inclinations are, these all come from him anyway. So we have no means, no reason to boast. We have all been given a gift, and we should be grateful and rejoice because of that. It's not a result of works, so that no one may boast, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And Abram walked in good works, that he was a friend of God. God blessed him, and through him, through his offspring, we are all blessed. Because we know that through the Jews, salvation comes from the Jews through Jesus Christ. That we are all saved through Jesus by grace through faith. That we were saved the same way Abram was. That God, being rich in mercy, just condescended. That He came down and saved us. Not because of any good thing in us, not because we were smart enough to have faith and believe. None of those things is why we were. That's not a reason we were saved. Not because we're smarter than the dumb guys who decide not to believe in the gospel. But the inclination we have to believe comes from God. The faith that we have to believe comes from God. But Abram is just a great example that we have. He lived this life. He is this exemplar of faith. So let's stop here. We'll pick up Genesis chapter 12 again next week.